Welcome everyone. And you just heard, we are recording this. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Cindy Olson. I'm the founder of the Executive Strategic Alliance, otherwise known as ESA. And before we get started, there's just a couple housekeeping items I'd like to share. First, we are recording it. You heard that. And so there will be a follow-up email sent to you all with the recording and also with Kevin's slides. It'll also go to people that have registered and not attended, because I had several people ask if it was being recorded since they weren't going to be able to join us today. And then the other thing is we want questions. We want a lot of questions. But if you don't feel comfortable coming off mute and asking the question, put them in chat as Kevin presents, and I'll be the one that monitors those chat questions, and I'll make sure that he answers those. So for the past 5 years, we've partnered with ADP to build this network. And what we do is we bring provocative world-class thought leaders to executives so that they can get a feel for what the future is going to bring, or what's in store for everyone in the future. We bring CHROs and CIOs together. We started with CHROs to begin with. Now we have included CIOs because we truly believe that you can't have an employee experience within an organization without those two partnering. And so we're very strong believers in those two organizations working together. Currently, we have participating in our network from executives, about 1,500 from 20 different cities. And we have thought leaders like Deloitte and McKinsey and the Chapman Leadership Group and the Hackett Group, and of course, Spencer Thomas, that join us pretty regularly to share their insights around what the future of work holds. So today, Kevin Koser of Spencer Thomas is our thought leader. And I'm going to give a brief introduction to Kevin, and then I'm also going to introduce the panel that we've assembled to join him. Kevin is the VP of Global Payroll and Human Sources for Spencer Thomas. He's an expert. And when I say an expert, I mean he's been in the business for 30 years. He started with some of the largest companies in Houston, and he's now become a global expert in terms of implementations of HR systems. In his current role, he is well-versed in the latest technologies and in implementing highly efficient, cutting-edge business solutions for global organizations. And you're going to hear more about Spencer Thomas later, but Kevin Koser is our thought leader today, and I'm so excited to have him. Joining Kevin on our as an expert panel is Stephanie Case. Stephanie, all of these executives are amazing leaders. So I would have to say that 3 times. I'm just going to say it once. They are all amazing leaders. Stephanie has 25 years of international experience as a consultant, leader, and human resource officer. And for the past 8 years, Stephanie has been an HR leader and global CHRO for Grant Thornton International, Grant Thornton UK, Black & Veatch, and now she's at DLL, which is a subsidiary of Robobank. Dave Williams, who is our IT expert today. He is the Global Senior Vice President of IT Operations and the Employee Experience for Mastercard. And he also has over 20 years of operations and leadership experience, and has managed several global operations with over 100 employees in fiscal responsibility, ranging from 5 million to 200 million. And finally, we have Mary Connolly, who just retired this year as a VP of HR from Liberty Mutual Insurance. And she's an innovative HR leader with significant experience in multiple specialty areas. She has served on the advisory board for the HR Policy Association, and was a board member is a board member for the Business Group on Health. I could go on and on and on about these guys. They're great leaders. They're extremely experienced in global, but I'm going to turn it over to Kevin now, and he can start sharing his insights around global, and then engaging the panel in questions as he goes. Remember, ask questions. Okay. Okay, Kevin, it's yours.
All right, thanks, Cindy, very much. Very kind comments. Let me. Oh, there we go. You know, after a year of these, you'd think that I would remember to hit mute or unmute. I'm just talking to myself, listening. That's the world we're in, folks. Okay, thank you, Cindy, very, very much. Let's get right into it. So, Thought Leadership Forum on global HR and the future of work. We've got a lot of topics to discuss in the short hour, so let's get right to it. Let me take myself off of video, and can you all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Everyone can see my screen?
Go. Yes.
Okay, go. Thank you. All right. All right. So yeah, this is interesting. So again, the financial crisis was the CFO's time to shine, and God bless them, they did. But over the past year and a half, it's really been HR's time to shine. And wow, have they stepped up to the plate. There are obviously major changes that have happened in the world over the last year and a half. A lot of these trends and a lot of the things we'll talk about today were starting before then, but we've had to shift. So we're going to talk about a couple, 5 really kind of key points. Comparison of a difference between a global and an international organization and the different strategies thereof. Work tech trends, what the future holds for global organizations, the global workforce, a lot of different trends and a lot of changes, as I'm sure we know, with our workforce, not only here but abroad. Some geopolitical metrics. I mean, there's everything is affecting business, and if it affects business, it affects HR and how we deal with our employees, our talent, and we need to take those things into consideration. Lastly, we'll go through some technology trends that have certainly been have occurred lately, and what has been going on certainly since the last year and a half. The HR Expo conference was about a month ago. Spencer Thomas goes every year. It's one of our big events, and it's certainly the big event for anyone interested in technology within human resources and payroll. Now, it's been I'll just kind of call it a fusion, right? It's just future trends of HR. We've got all these things fusing together. A lot of this has been caused by the pandemic. Many of these have started, prior to the pandemic. An interesting thing, if I just look at things such as, I won't read all of these, we're going to talk about these individually, but when I look at work reimagined, the location of work, things of that nature. I did a session, Cindy and I did a session, was it late 2019 or early 20, before the pandemic hit, and we talked about how some companies are offering benefits such as the ability to work remote. Some companies were actually kind of changing the model and not having folks come to the office, working remotely, having an executive team that wasn't necessarily part of headquarters, but these were choices that companies had at the time. We don't have those choices anymore. These things were thrust upon us, and HR had to deal with it immediately. So we'll talk about some of those trends and how those things have occurred. Now, first of all, when we talk about the difference between an international and a global company, and it's, it's funny, the graphics here are important. When you look at an international country and you look at my comments there, right? And I'm going to pull this up. These are the different global considerations that companies need to consider, when managing their operations, managing their employees. The first graphic for international, I mean, we've got the entire world there, but all the countries are different colors. The regions are different colors. Things are shown and distributed differently. And many international companies have the model of, yes, we do business in Asia. Yes, we do business in Belarus. Yes, we do business in Chile, but they really run separately. They don't really bring everything together. The operations are there, their people are there, but there's not a cohesive way of doing business, especially operationally from an HR perspective, versus a global company that really truly embraces the thought of one company. I don't care where we are in the world, we are one company, we have one set of values, and we're going to leverage and utilize systems in order to promote that. Single processes, single systems of record. Those are companies that I would consider global. And I mean, when I talk to my clients when Spencer Thomas talks to our clients, they're asking us what direction to go. This is certainly the way we lean towards and what we believe is the best way to move forward. So quickly, and again, sake of time, and we really want to get this panel involved. Top 3 takeaways. We recommend a one company mentality. Again, now how do we do that? The first step simply is systems. Without the right systems in place, it's virtually impossible to execute single process and single solution, single definitions, things of that nature. And once we have those in place, putting the effort in going forward with standard processes and procedures, again, following regional and national laws are very important. One last thing before we get to the panel. Companies come to Spencer Thomas a lot and say, hey, we want to get to this global company mentality, this one company mentality, and we should have done it earlier. We should have done it when we thought about it, we just didn't put a high priority on it. And now they're asking us to come in and we help them go through that effort. But a lot of it is fixing, broken processes or fixing, broken areas within the company because they didn't start early. So my recommendation here is if you can start early, do it. If you need to start now, don't waste time. And if you have an opportunity, either now or in a future position to grow and build, which we've got some customers right now that are coming to us and saying, we want to tackle this immediately before, we're on a high growth trend and they want to get on the ball early. That's the best way to do it in my opinion, in our opinion. So I'm just going to put a question out there to the panel, and I'd like to start with Mary, and then after Mary, we'll go Stephanie and then Dave. So the question is along the lines of, in your experience, what are the best values or the greatest values that you've realized or seen by embracing again, this global company, this one company mentality? And again, I'll start with Mary.
Hi, everyone. It's Mary Connolly. It's great to be here. I'm very excited about this topic. So just for context on Liberty Mutual, it is a Fortune 100 company operating in over 30 countries. It very much was an international company, not a global company, up until probably the last 20 years. And it's been in business for over 100 years. The evolution to the global company started with the implementation of Oracle, and then it took at least 10 years. That was in 2001. It took at least 10 years for us to move the mentality to a global company. With the HRIS system, it was really driven by the need to figure out where everybody was in the world and what they were for talent mobility and data analytics. And that just opened up so many opportunities to deal with the employee experience and the customer experience. So I think to what Kevin said, if they had to do it over again, they certainly would have started with the one company mentality. And it took a long time to get there. But given where we are and the opportunities that exist for companies, I would definitely recommend the global company strategy. It was a game changer.
Thanks, Mary. Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie. My name is Stephanie Hasenbos-Case. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm thrilled to be here today. Like Mary, I thought I'd set a little context. So I have worked, as a consultant for companies like Accenture and Deloitte, who are truly global. I've also been a CHRO at Grant Thornton International. Black & Veatch is an example, and where I am today, where they're not global companies, but international companies. And I'll tell you that I've experienced very different mindsets and mentalities in those organizations. And, an example I would have is, a global organization is one that really is focused on creating that one company culture, right? And breaking down silos and even sharing goals, right, across the geographies, which has, huge power in terms of driving performance and consistency. I would also say it's much easier in a global company to centralize functions like HR, just because that mindset is there, and you're able to explain much more easily how you can, delivering consistent services globally really helps to enhance that employee experience and client experience. And it enables you to deliver more value in a more efficient and effective way. I would also say that, a global mentality helps you to avoid reinventing the wheel in every country. You can just see the inefficiencies, right, when every country does things on their own. And then I would finally just mention, knowledge management or knowledge sharing is much easier in a global organization, and you're able to accelerate the development, right, of your employees, and again have much more of a consistent experience for your employees and your clients. So I just call out those are a few areas and things that I've noticed and differences between a global versus an international organization.
Stephanie, that's a really good point. The knowledge transfer options that you have in that kind of structure versus not. That's a really good call out. Dave, our CIO, but also I love we've got a head of IT that also has employee experience under his belt. So that's I love that we're merging the two. Dave, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to be part of the panel and, partner with the HR. What's cool about this is, several years ago, we implemented employee experience into the operations and technology. And, I was meeting with Cindy and she was reminding me of, hey, how important it's going to be in the future for IT and HR to be partners. And, I was laughing and saying, yeah, I can see that in the future, as well as corporate security. And so we've really come to realize that the partnership between HR, employee experience, IT is key, to be in, even a global company. I can tell you, when you think about it, from our brand, of course, we're a global company that's one of the most recognized brands in the world that, that helps. But from an IT perspective, you really had to think about, what we tell the team is we have to think globally, we have to operate, regionally, and we have to streamline our processes and procedures to, help us do our job the best that we can. But we also have to abide by the local laws that are put in place. And I think, by doing that, what we've been able to do over the last few years is really provide the ability to identify the gaps, that we had globally with support, with onboarding, and even the supply chain, that's, and by working collaboratively, that's really helped us to improve the employee experience for the, and what I always call, they're not our employees. A great leader considers their internal people the most valuable people to their organizations, and we call them consumers. And, that's where the employee experience really starts. And, you got to have it at top of mind, because I've always said, if you take care of the employees, they will always take care of the return on the investment and, protect the company. So that's what I have.
Nice, Dave. And I appreciate the segue. I don't know if it was intentional,
Kevin,
but
hey,
I love it.
Kevin,
Yes.
Kevin, sorry to interrupt, but Michael Smith has his hand up and I don't want his question before you leave that slide. You already did. He has a question about the slide. So Michael, you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah. So no, I appreciate that distinction. And I think for the most part, most people recognize that, but how many companies market this concept that when they're marketing that they're an international company or a global company, they're marketing it that way? Does that make sense?
This is Kevin. I'll step in from my experience. And when you say marketing, we're talking about outside the organization, whether it's trying to recruit talent or establish ourselves differently, correct?
Correct.
I would say that international companies, by my experience, don't necessarily do that. They will talk about we have operations here, we have operations there, but it really is more of a centralized focus on what you want to do. Now, my global companies, our clients at Spencer Thomas that do this at a global level, are quick to highlight the fact that we have single process, we have single definitions, we have teams across the globe versus the standard hierarchy. And they use, from what we've seen, they use this type of approach to their advantage because they're proud of it. They've put the effort, they've put the investment in, and they want to reap the rewards of it. And that's part of it. That's what I've seen.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, work talent trends. Again, segue from David's, take care of, I think it was Richard Branson. I mean, there's a lot of leaders out there, right, that talk about, you take care of your people, they'll take care of your customers. That's focus number one. Here are some key trends. There's a ton of trends, guys, but these are some that I focused on for this session. Mental health and well-being is now part of our job in HR. Didn't used to be, but you see over and over that this is becoming a trend. Having services, having support for our employees. It's something that, again, it kind of used to be one of those nice to haves that companies used to differentiate themselves. It's now becoming a critical thing that they need to have. Agility. We're moving outside of, again, that hierarchical organization of top down into building teams that are agile, and that means skills. If we have a project, I don't care what that project is, we're going to search the globe. If we are a global company, we have access to the skills that we need to get that project done on a team-by-team basis. Being part of a purpose-driven organization, I'm sure we've seen this. This is big with our millennial group out there. And by the way, they're coming, and our baby boomers are not, right? So these are a lot of this is driven by them. But being part of a company that matters is extremely important. A friend of mine years ago, I remember, said as part of her leadership, said that to create a set of values for your company. And I think that has kind of fast forwarded into being part of a purpose-driven organization. And then the employee negotiation power, the great resignation, right? Especially if you're in hospitality, retail, in areas like that, this is becoming critical. The push for the $15 minimum wage, everything that's happened over the last year has really given employees negotiation power, which means more flexibility, more higher rates, things of that nature that we haven't had to face so much before. One of the trends, and I focused on being part of a purpose-driven organization. If you look at this stat, imagine you're a company that does this, and imagine that you're a company that does not. And in the battle for talent, who's going to win out? 57% reduction in turnover for companies that embrace being part of a purpose-driven organization and have engaged in corporate charities and volunteer type efforts. And again, a lot of systems are putting this into their HR, into their HR solutions, specific modules or, functionality to deal with exactly that. It's becoming very important. So again, employee engagement, like Dave mentioned, is critical. The agility, again, we're going to be reinventing what we call teams in the future, and it's going to be based upon skills, not necessarily location. So investment in different retention incentives is a huge differentiator. It used to be, we knew the cost of losing an employee versus hiring an employee, right? And always maintaining an employee was the cost-efficient way of doing business, but it's expanded well beyond that in today's world. So my question for our panel on this one, and Stephanie, why don't we start with you, is how can HR and IT balance the changing world in today's employee workforce, right? With what we're talking about with flexibility and different methods and critical employee wants and needs versus maintaining world-class production, especially in a globally competitive world. We've got India and China, they're working very hard, especially in the IT space, especially in manufacturing, right? How can a global company compete when we have now the negotiation power of the employees and the way that employees are viewing work these days?
Sure. Oh my goodness, Kevin, I just have to say, we've got some great data and some great stats, right, that you can get that are out there, but so much of this we are doing, trial and error, right? How do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself? How do you become that employer of choice? So to meet the changing employee dynamic, there's several things that we're doing and we're exploring today as an example. So we're implementing employee-led flexible benefits and work arrangements, to support the changing needs and frankly, the changing expectations of our employees. We're implementing new collaboration tools so that our people can collaborate from anywhere, and making sure that work, is really seamless. We're also trying to enable more just-in-time employee self-service solutions. And we're rolling out new engagement strategies to help our members to engage in new ways and help them to adjust to this hybrid way of working. And an example of that is we had no meeting Wednesdays, so to help with flexibility. But by definition, no meeting Wednesdays is not flexible. And when you're working in an international organization, you miss days with Asia then, right? So it's challenging. So we're moving to core office hours where we're asking people per region to be available for meetings. But then the hours outside of that, we really want them to take a breather, not be in meetings, 8 hours a day, and really give them that flexibility in their schedules to help them avoid meeting fatigue and frankly burnout. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing.
Interesting. Mary.
So I'm going to touch on a couple of the slides. So from Liberty standpoint, the support for mental health and wellness has been a constant. And I think it came out probably even more so because, the pandemic was a game changer. And that's where we started bringing in speakers to actually talk about mental health and talk about, we had concerns with domestic violence because people were at home. So really talking about how to protect populations and then dealing with childcare, providing services for families that had kids at home because schools were closed. So, that whole issue in terms of having infrastructure to support mental health was critical to be successful. And then from a global standpoint, we've had what's called the Liberty Foundation and Service, a Service Global Day for employees, and consistently encouraged people to volunteer for corporate charity activities with company match with no caps on 50 cents on the dollar for over 9,000 organizations. So very much being part of a purpose-driven organization is, I think, why they've been able to retain talent. I think the game changer for us was the employee negotiation power, because at any point in time from a workforce flexibility standpoint, we probably only had about 25 to 30% of the population working from home full time. And that changed where we had to send 50,000 people home across the globe and figure out ergonomics and laptops and the supply chain issues that we had and how we were going to take care of customers at the same time. So for us, looking at like a hybrid workplace and what looks like in the future and working really closely with IT because probably there was nothing that we weren't doing where we weren't figuring out how to do it together with the IT organizations, with security, with a whole bunch of teams. So it really became efforts to change how work gets done. And I think from this point on, work will not look the same. We already know what's going to happen with corporate real estate because footprints do not have to look the same and talent strategies are changing. So just huge change.
Absolutely. Good, interesting perspective. And yeah, the partnership with HR and IT, Dave, let's kind of finish this one with you.
Mary, thank you. It's where I've said over and over, and I continue to say it to everybody or any panel or any podcast that I'm on, is that the HR and IT and corporate security relationship is the most important relationship going forward, especially through the pandemic. I can't tell you how many times I've been on calls with HR leaders across the world for our company, trying to figure out how do we do it better? How do we provide, laptops in countries that we're having problems getting assets to? How do I get them on, on board as quickly as possible without any interruption so they can perform their job? The employee engagement is critical. Engaging the employees to get feedback often, to understand during this time, with the hybrid workforce, what can we do better to provide the best possible support and experience to them, and giving them the flexibility at the same time to, not only worry about work, but they have to worry about their family as well. And I think one of the other things too that I'd bring up is team and teamwork. It's key to ensure engagement and retaining the talent around the company. And then probably the last thing I would say is, engage and be the leader by example and help them know your staff and what they're doing, what their strongest skill sets are, and making sure you leverage that today. Because, I read the book, 9 Lies About Work that Cindy, said, I highly encourage you to read. I totally agree with that book. I mean, you think about it. When you're thinking about your staff, and it's something I've done for a few years, is really trying to find the best skill sets out of my employees so that they're doing the best job they can do and they're happy every day. And I find that that works time and time again. So hopefully that helps.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave, and thanks rest of the panel. Next, global workforce. So new definition of work. Again, this used to be a benefit, or some companies considered it a benefit as part of recruiting talent. Now, everyone must adapt to this way of working, whether it's remote, hybrid, different locations, so on and so forth. A higher concentration on global compliance. Now, we've all been going through, or I'm sure most of us have gone through the changes with GDPR over the past years, but especially with the pandemic, now we're dealing with, Australia is shut down. Companies or countries are, there's a geopolitical, we'll talk about that in a minute, but there's a geopolitical side to this that we also need to concentrate on. Kind of back to the new group of employees and people coming in, a shift in priorities. It used to be very simple. I need a raise, I need more money, you did a good job, here's a spot bonus. That's not the future of work anymore. It's going to be much more of a flexibility model than monetary. In fact, a good friend of mine just gave a TED talk recently on this, and she was talking about how HR organizations, especially in compensation, need to rethink how they define their compensation model. And it's more than just, okay, we've got your base salary and bonus and commissions and things of that nature. What is the value when you're negotiating with someone? Hey, do you mind working full-time in the office? Well, actually, I would really prefer to do it remotely. Okay, what is the cost of that? And how can we incorporate things like that into our model, in addition to just benefits in monetary areas? Someone wants Fridays off. Okay, what is it worth to have a 4-day week versus a 5-day week? And there's a value in that. So we need to kind of rethink our compensation model and be much more flexible and monetary. Now, talk about flexibility. Another stat, up to 54% of employees are likely to leave if companies are not offering them flexibility. Doesn't mean they have to give everything, but certainly we're in a new world where flexibility needs to be part of the overall model and direction, the way we treat our employees. It's not as simple as just saying, here's $1,000, thanks for not quitting, right? We need to think much differently these days. So the takeaways here, with especially the new definition of work, right? A huge opportunity to recruit the best talent without locational needs. If you're located in New York City and you need a vice president of finance, and the best person out there is in Chicago, or maybe that person's in Spain, depending on if we're truly a global company. Let's take advantage of the talent versus location. And again, rethink the standard compensation model, some of the examples I gave earlier. And we certainly need to continue to invest in compliance assurance. There's, HR, part of our job is to mitigate risk, and we need to make sure that from a, global compliance perspective, we are covered. So our panel, going back to, and I'll start with Mary this time, biggest opportunities for companies who take advantage of this global workforce. So if a company truly embraces this, what are the opportunities for them? And, possibly what are the cons for those that don't?
So thanks. So I would go back to what I said about the pandemic becoming a game changer for organizations to rethink about how work gets done. The way that we started looking at it was, obviously we needed to get everybody home, and then started really talking amongst the teams about what jobs should just be 100% at home. So if we think about the call centers, and we thought about some of the other jobs, we did not need them in offices. And then on top of that, executive presence in offices was almost at 100%, because the expectation of face time was important. So leadership understood that you needed to make sure that if you set up meetings like Cindy mentioned, or if you did things, it sends a message to people about how you expect them to act. So changing behavior across the board that says we are not going to expect 100% of the workforce in an office. The other piece we started looking at, especially as it related to children and people having to, get kids on buses, off buses, or to childcare, is allowing them to choose their hours. So a standard 8-hour day didn't have to look like that. They could choose what hours they worked in the day. In some cases, that could be at night. So we told them we were going to try to be more agile and flexible with schedules and try to figure it out with meetings, recognizing that if you do things within core hours for people for certain primary activities, that you look at that. Global compliance is a big deal from a cybersecurity standpoint, to make sure if you're operating in that you are protecting your systems. And for us, we had a firewall issue, so very concerned about cybersecurity risk. And we saw a lot of that happening with, people trying to get to our systems, unemployment. And then the bigger piece, because we've had an issue with FLSA for a long time for non-exempt employees, is now that people are home, making sure you are tracking that they are not working off the clock. And if they are working off the clock, that you are paying them. So the need to actually pay attention to how people are working, particularly for that non-exempt population, is critical, because that could cost you a lot of money. And then I think what Kevin mentioned on monetary, in terms of what people value, flexibility is a big deal. I still think they expect to be paid. And, being a home 100% of the time is not for a lot of people. We had some employees who begged us to send them back in the office. So the new normal, I think, for bringing people in and onboarding them will change. And I think the manager's ability to be flexible and understand the needs of the workforce is going to be critical.
Yeah, excellent, Mary. Thanks. Great feedback. Dave.
So I'd touch, pretty much what Mary and Stephanie said in previous, answers when it comes to, what are some of the biggest opportunities, really making sure that you got the work tools in place to be able to collaborate, globally and interact with your employees often. One of the things that I would say, though, that we need to be mindful of is, we want to have flex hybrid work. That's a future of work. It's important. We got to partner with HR to figure that out. We also have to, have the employees' engagement so that we get it right and so that we don't get it wrong. And then see, the great resignation even, improve even greater. And I think the one of the other things too is what I've told many people recently is compassion and empathy to attain talent is, very important right now, as well as being flexible. I think what I've learned most about, I was on a podcast recently and they asked me, what do you think is one of the greatest things you could probably tell other leaders across the globe? And I said, we went from having to be passionate about our jobs, to be the example in leadership, to now through the pandemic and what we're dealing with today, to be compassionate, to understand that things are going on in our employees' lives that we need to be mindful of and we need to be compassionate about. And that's what makes us all great leaders. And, I say that especially in front of all of these HR leaders that, who I want to be, compassionate, because you would think us IT leaders wouldn't care, but that's wrong. And that would be an HR job. But I've learned some of that through some of my HR, peers and colleagues. So
Back to our partnership between the two groups, right?
yes.
Good thoughts, Dave. Thank you. Stephanie, let's end with you on this one.
Right. I would just echo what Dave just said. Oh my goodness, empathy really goes a long way today, especially because we don't know what people are dealing with at home, right, and in their lives. And not everybody has or is fortunate enough to have an office, right, where you can, walk out and close the door here at home, right, and separate yourself. But I would also call out that, I think things have changed. We recently did a survey and almost 80% of our workforce does not want to come back to the office full time. And so I think allowing employees to choose where and when and how they want to work is important, just as we heard from Mary. And also work from anywhere, I think, is going to be a big differentiator for companies. And that's something we're doing. And the beauty of that is you then can recruit from anywhere, right? And so that really opens up talent pools that perhaps were untapped previously. So that's key and critical. And, that doesn't come without tax implications, right? And without, some administrative headaches, but the benefit far outweighs the administrative headaches. And we're seeing a lot of people take us up on being able to work from anywhere. We are also, you mentioned, Kevin, compensation. We're looking at new compensation models and looking, for example, at paying global roles, global salaries, the same for regional roles, and not basing compensation on, where you live. So somebody in a global role, living in Italy is paid differently than somebody in a global role living in New York. And because people don't have to be in those locations anymore, we're looking at comp differently.
That is very interesting. I'll tell you, from a Spencer Thomas perspective, we have a lot of consultants and talent throughout the world, and that's been one of the big changes for us lately. Is if we have someone in Mexico City, right, and we're working with a client, they're like, well, yeah, but they're in Mexico City. Why should we be paying U.S. rates? Well, the answer is because this is the best person in the world to do this job. And at this point, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter for us where they work. And if you don't want them, that's fine. We have other clients that will. And that's, everything's kind of flattening that way. So great point, Stephanie. I appreciate that, that feedback.
Hey, Kevin,
yes.
I don't want to interrupt, but Michael Smith had a question. I don't know that if you want to take it now or wait till after these last two slides.
I'll let Michael decide that.
Okay, Michael.
We're gonna have a time for questions at the end, so I'll let him decide.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm asking questions while I'm interrupting your presentation there. So back to what you were talking about on the previous slide there. So how many companies do you see are actually truly executing on this? Because when I look into the market and I read different companies where some companies were making a decision that we're going to go 100% remote, and then we're going to go hybrid, but then they revert back and say, nope, we're going to bring everyone back into the office. And specifically at the executive level, I guess, do you guys have a general sense from percentages of companies at a global level that are really truly open to considering hybrid levels, even at the executive level, versus saying it from to try to attract talent, but they really don't mean it?
So speaking on behalf of Spencer Thomas, I do not have a percentage, but I will say high percentage of our clients are making this change because they have to. Part of it is we're advising them to, but trust me, we come to advise them and they say, Kevin, we're already executing this stuff because this is absolutely a need. I don't mention our clients on these calls, but I will say there's a global 100 of ours, very progressive company out of New York, that they were beginning this work well before the pandemic. There are these kinds of changes in their workforce well before the pandemic, before we even knew that the last year and a half was going to happen. And wow, are they thriving right now? They are not having the trouble that a lot of companies are that have had to react to this. But most, if they weren't ahead, if they weren't doing it before, what I'm seeing, what Spencer Thomas is seeing, is that our clients are now reacting to this just because they have to. If you're a company, if you're an international or global company, and you are not doing these things, the talent pool is tough enough already, and you're going to be you're going to be very, very lucky to survive if you don't change.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I kind of see that the future is bleak for companies that are not willing to have that flexibility going forward, because I think it's shifted from a company-driven employment type model to post-pandemic. It's an employee-driven, company model now. From that perspective, that employees are really driving how companies need to react in that case. And
one of our earlier trends, right? One of our early trends we talked about, the employees have a lot more control, or I should say applicants, I should say people, right? Because they're not employees yet. They have a lot more control over what they do than prior.
Yeah, and I think it's Mary. I think the thing I would add is I think the big deal for companies and why they, some want people back in the office is the concern about culture and how you maintain culture. But I think success is going to look like, how you can maintain a culture but provide employees with the flexibility that they need, because life has changed for us.
Absolutely. All right, some of our geopolitical metrics, again, international trade has been hurt, as we know. I mean, listen, HR is the one group that we have been able to take this awful situation and exploit, for lack of a better term, the opportunities available to us, right? Like I said at the very beginning, this is HR's time to shine. This is the CHRO's time to shine. There are opportunities to take advantage of here, but not that this hasn't devastated the globe, as we know. So, trade has been hurt, and country shutdowns limit business and opportunities. I'll give you a real world story. So we're Spencer Thomas, we're running a global payroll project right now for a large organization. They're in every region, and their headquarters in Asia is in Sydney. And we cannot get our talent, the best people available for this assignment, into Australia because they've shut it down. In some instances, we have citizens that cannot get into the country. And this is really hampering this project and hampering this company because of some of the, again, the things that are happening throughout the world with shutdowns and things of that nature. Now, trade is dropping fast. And from an HR perspective, this is going to have to go down. It's just trickle down, revenue to, the finances to the employees, and where do we cut and what can we do to be more efficient? Efficiency is going to come next when we talk HR trends. All right. But all these things matter. Opportunities to recruit at a global level have been stalled. So we talked about an opportunity, right, to get the best talent, but because of some of the things happening throughout the world, there are limitations there. As I mentioned, the word I'm dealing with directly. Business expansion is slowing down, but the grand opening is going to come soon. Are we planning for that? Because once the floodgates open, those you're either going to be prepared or not, and we don't want to be in a reactionary mode when that happens. Lastly, we may need to rethink some global directives until things improve. I mean, just because we have a plan, and I'm an old PMO guy, if I got a project plan or I got a plan and I've got deadlines and I've got milestones, we do need to be agile. We do need to kind of rethink, some of our initiatives just because of what is happening in the world. So as much as we have the opportunities and a lot of the trends that are voting in our favor from an HR perspective, we also have to be realistic on things that are happening across the globe. Now let's talk about tech. So work tech technology trends. This is the slide that Cindy and I put together a while ago. I kind of like it. It shows really the advancement of technology from an HR perspective. And we're seeing things like when, the National Labor Relations Act was founded, when, Equal Pay Act started. One thing I really like is this, and I think from an IT and an HR perspective, we can appreciate that. If you look at the lower part there, 1970 U.S. patent number 4398249. I'd like to point out that ADP was founded in 1949, and in 1970, the patent for the spreadsheet was filed. And when we talk systems and we talk HR and IT, the one system, when I go to any client that we need to eliminate systems, I've got disparate systems, I got all this stuff all over the place. The first system I want to eliminate, no offense to, Mr. Gates, is I want to eliminate Excel. And that's one thing that we, from a systems perspective, we count on, all right? But if you look at this, as we move from record keeping to integration, these are the focuses of HR systems, to cloud, and now we're into the talent and analytics side. What is increasing? It's the employee engagement. Back to one of our first slides, and what Stephanie, Mary, and Dave have hit over and over, is the importance of employee engagement. And when we look at the last few years here, where we've got next gen with ADP, but artificial intelligence and chatbots, all of this stuff was taking off, and then we got struck with COVID, and everything came to a stop, and the world changed for us in a lot of ways. Now, what also happened, from what I've seen, and this is from our involvement with Spencer Thomas in this industry and the things we're learning at HR Tech and others, is the artificial intelligence and the chatbots and all this great, that stuff really didn't stop. In fact, what it opened up was a chance for a lot of these companies to focus on R&D, and instead of having to go beta and test things out and fail with customers, it gave them a lot of opportunity to improve their solutions, and they're out there. So the technology trends, artificial intelligence, it's unavoidable. It's something that we're going to have. It's something we're going to need to take advantage of. And it's going to be a critical component of HR. I was watching a documentary a short time ago, and when we think of AI and we think about these robots, we think of factories and plants, or we think of things like self-driving trucks, not just cars, but when we start talking about inventory and logistics, we're having trucks. Now, how does that affect HR? Our truck drivers. There's the truck drivers out there are scared to death about their jobs because of what's happening on that side. The thing that interests me more than any was a study that showed they had a computer and a lawyer. And I think from an IT and an HR perspective, we can all appreciate this. And they set them on a course. They gave them a fixed amount of time to review a contract. And not only a large contract, but there was also a little Easter egg in there, something along the lines of, if you see this clause, you get a $10,000 bonus, something to that effect, right? The machine beat the lawyer. The machine was 90% accurate on a contract review. And when we talk, we all know the term red lines. The computer caught 90% of the contract red lines, including the Easter egg. The contract lawyer, did not. He finished at around 70, 80% during the time frame and missed the Easter egg. So this isn't just machines driving cars or artificial intelligence that way. They're doing work. So when we start talking about executing a payroll, or going through performance reviews and things of that nature, AI is unavoidable. Personalizing the employee experience. We've hit this over and over and over, and the importance of that, and the criticality of this being a game changer within our world, within certainly HR. And another interesting trend is virtual reality. And when you think about the virtual reality and these helmets, right, the opportunities of onboarding, now we're global, now we're remote. Hey, your package is coming in the mail, and now they put this helmet on and they're meeting their manager real time. They're meeting their team real time. Training, they're going through training opportunities and training exercises from a virtual reality perspective. And I don't know how many on the meeting here have actually tried these helmets or done this virtual reality thing. It is a crazy real ride, and it's almost scary how realistic these things are. But it's a great technology, and companies are going to start utilizing this a lot, especially in our HR space. So Keystep, when we talk about artificial intelligence, a lot of this has to do also with optimization and streamlining, right? There's only so much we can do. And believe me, at Spencer Thomas, we do a lot of optimization projects and a lot of business process improvement and systems operation. There's only so far we can go, just as there is in any business, right? So what's the next step? It's going to be AI. And when you look at this stat, 14 hours, HR managers spend just manually completing things that could be automated. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean financially for us as far as savings? But when we started talking about the value of work and the changing aspect of work and the flexibility of someone wanting to work a 4-day week versus a 5-day, how can we keep that productivity and those levels where we need to be if we can automate the right way? So takeaways, again, be proactive in technology advancements. The employee experience means more than just the job. Remember, the employee experience is, when we're talking about interfacing with the employee, it's no longer manager self-service and employee self-service. The new future of this is when someone logs into their portal, their company portal, it's not just the tasks of their job. It's going to be things like charity and work-life balance and things of that. Think of, and I hate to say it this way, but almost a Facebook style type engagement for our employees. Not only so that they're interacting with their team, which by the way is now agile and across the globe, and their managers, but what's going on in their community. Who do they work with that has similar interests outside of work? And what organizations and groups can be started that way? Again, that type of thing leads to a 57% reduction in people leaving us, right? So that's going to be very important. And also, blending the technical optimization with the new way of work. How can we exploit, our talent and give them what they need while still remaining productive? I remember I was on a flight, actually coming back from HR Tech, speaking to this girl, and she's telling her employee, "Hey, you don't have to show up on Fridays. But yes, you still have to work here. You have to work there." And I'm listening to a lot of this, and this is that flexibility side. But I just kept thinking to myself, how are we going to maintain our productivity? And especially in the States, lead us economically with the global competition that's out there. That's going to be an interesting dynamic to work through. So I'm going to end this with Dave on this. So the question, or actually, let me do this. Let me start with Stephanie. Let's go Stephanie, Mary, and then Dave, I'd like you to finish this. So, pros and cons, or how do you recommend implementing? Do we recommend implementing cutting edge technology? I mean, like being an early adapter versus waiting for, technology to stabilize and be mature. I've seen it both ways. I think that it can work both ways if you do it the right way. But what are your thoughts or recommendations on this? Again, starting Stephanie, and then we'll go Mary and then Dave to finish.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. In terms of being an early adopter, that's something I'm always a proponent of, how can we continuously improve as a global function? And my challenge, my real challenge is that IT and procurement do not always agree with me in prioritizing the budget for that. So, and I would just say it depends on the HR solution, the cost and the scope. Cheaper solutions like artificial intelligence or chatbots. Absolutely, those are things that we look to implement, early and often and where we can, and are constantly seeking ways to implement those and find ways to take out administrative work, transactional work, and automate that. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And then also just getting in line with everybody else in the organization from an IT investment request perspective. So things don't move as quickly as we hope, which hampers our ability to be an early adopter sometimes. But we have found that if you want to pilot something and go in and say, look, let's start small, see if this works, that's something I found to be an effective way to bring in new technology on the cheaper side to get started.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good. Mary.
So my experience has always been try with hybrid in terms of automating where you can ensure business continuity, especially if you think about core systems like benefits and payroll. That said, the last system we implemented was a global case management, which really dealt with intake and how to service it. So there are some solutions that can overlay technology, whether it's new or legacy, including the use of RPA and chatbots. But you need to really figure out what problem you're trying to solve. I think with agile approach to implementation now and the cloud-based solutions, companies have way more ability to actually be early adopters. And if they can be early adopters, they should, recognizing that from a business continuity standpoint, you do not want to inhibit the employee or the customer experience if things don't work. So you always need a plan B.
I appreciate that. Thanks. And Dave, to close this out, man, I'm very interested in your opinion as our IT lead on this panel. What are your thoughts here?
Oh, well, I would tell you, since I work for a technology company and I manage IT, that I would probably almost bet I'm going to say take advantage of the technology. I would tell you, bring in AI bots, do the chat, drive self-serve tools. And what I tell my employees all the time, how often can you get a hold of Amazon on the phone? Barely. It will take it would take a long time to get somebody on the phone because they're very good at self-serve. And then when you look at technology, is just out there in the world, in our face every day. So now is so important to take advantage of those self-serve tools like the AI bots we have across the enterprise. We've got chats across the enterprise. I'm leveraging every type of self-serve to bring the volume down at the desk so that my help desk can do better things and get our users back online faster. And that's, anything you can do to, do that is great. From an HR perspective, I would tell you, I'm working on, an end-to-end process, to onboard, our consumers with a much better priceless experience. And I think the thing to do there, is we pilot things in regions to make sure that it's successful and not force it across an entire enterprise. So it depends on the technology and how you're doing it and who you have to interact with to actually gain, and seek the, who they want and how positive it's going to be for them. In HR, we do it in little pods,
Sure.
I would say across regions to make sure. And in my world, we just open the floodgates and throw it across the entire enterprise, so, and I think the last point of that, it's very important to network. Make sure you're networking with your peers and your colleagues. Make sure you're on advisory boards because there's so much technology out there right now. You get flooded at our levels. And so it's really important to talk to your peers and colleagues about what are you doing? What are you seeing? What's some of the great technology? And then bringing that to your colleagues and peers. I do that every day with HR. I find cool tools that Cindy brings to us. I'm like, hey, have we thought about this? And they do the same thing for me. So that's what I have.
So
Approach is
Kevin,
important. I love that.
we
Yes.
are at time and we always try and stay on time. So if you don't mind me wrapping it up, I want to thank
Not at all.
Dave and Stephanie and Mary. They were awesome. And Kevin, if anyone needs help with thinking through the things that you've heard today, Kevin's information will be sent with the PowerPoint and the recording, so you can get a hold of Spencer Thomas. Huge advocate of Spencer Thomas. I think they're amazing. And I just had somebody say great information. I agree. So thanks for being here, you guys. And we appreciate you, our panel, so much. Talk soon. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.